Hey reader, reading class you've always heard the word theme. You learned in 4th grade that a theme is like a moral of the story. In 5th grade, you compiled multiple themes for books. Now that we're in our fantasy unit, we're going to do something really cool with theme work. And today I want to show you that readers can actually compare themes across texts. Fantasy stories lend themselves perfectly to this. Why? Because fantasy stories have common lessons. They're constantly talking about that good versus evil, talking about characters who have an inner struggle that they have to overcome, or a lot of times there's sacrifice that happens in a fantasy story. And therefore, we can learn some really common themes from a lot of the fantasy stories that are out there. Things like those who've been hurt can be the most dangerous, or we all have the potential for good and evil. Sometimes in life, we hold ourselves back from our fullest potential. Or finally, sometimes sacrifice is necessary for others to be saved. As I just listed through those themes, I bet you could think of multiple fantasy stories that cover that theme work. Now, that's the easy part, coming up with themes. Again, I said you guys are pros at this. But once you decide and you notice a similar theme, the big work that we're doing today is that readers think and analyze the way authors crafted or developed this theme differently. C.S. Lewis will not develop the good versus evil theme the same way that J.K. Rowling does. Okay? Likewise, Rick Riordan's themes of sacrifice are not going to be dealt with the same way as, say, Frozen from Disney. Okay? They may have a similar theme, but the author got to that theme in a very different way, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. When we ask ourselves, how did the author get to this theme differently, we have to ask ourselves, was there a moment of character choice that was different? How did the characters respond to trouble differently? And then we can actually begin to compare and contrast in each of our texts when characters have conflicting emotions. What do the characters in text 1 do versus what do the characters over in text 2 do? Are there different recurring images or objects? What's the choice of language the author uses? And how are the life lessons taught? I want you to think very carefully again. Let's take that in life there's always going to be evil, but you have to overcome evil. I mean, Disney's full of villainous characters. Jafar, Scar, Ursula. Okay. But they don't go about their business all the same way. The cartoonist decided to have them do different things, to have different objects, to have different styles, personalities. Authors of books do this too. Today, when you do your work, today, when you're thinking and plugging in some of those common themes and you're comparing your stories, you might choose your short story you read early on versus the book you're reading now. If your book club is in a second book, then you might compare your first book's themes to your second book's themes. You're going to find that the themes through all these texts are similar. The big question is, how did the author get to those themes? What moves, what craft moves did the author use to bring about these themes in a different way? You might consider setting up your notebook like this. You might have your book or text that you're comparing. You might then have the common theme that you're looking at between both texts. And then you might be analyzing, well, what does this author do? What does this author not do? Versus, what does the other author do, or what does the other author not do? Think about those things today. Again, good readers recognize that there's similar themes throughout texts. Great readers recognize different ways authors use different craft moves to craft those themes in their books. Think about that today as you do your reading.